Welcome and good evening. I would like to call the October 13th Planning Policy Commission meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. Tonight's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The Planning Policy Commission is in person, but staff or members of the public may be attending virtually or in person. So welcome to everyone who's here. It's great to see so many faces, both on our dais, is that the right word? Dais, as well as in the crowd here. So great to have so much interest. And so in terms of attendance, Kristen, do we have a quorum tonight?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Okay, so our first item of business is to take action to approve the minutes for the September 29th meeting. Are there any corrections to the draft minutes provided in the agenda packet? Okay, so hearing none, the minutes are approved. Our next item of business is public comment. So I'll just provide some brief guidelines for public comments. We'll have actually multiple sessions of public comment tonight. The first is just general public comment. Comments at tonight's meeting may be made in person or virtually. For all who would like to speak during public comments, speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. If you're attending virtually by computer or by phone and would like to speak during public comments, in addition to what I just mentioned, please mute your microphone when not speaking. If you're having technical issues, try joining the meeting using a different device such as a smartphone or a tablet, or use the call-in information in the meeting invite to call into the meeting. Public comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and we factor them into the decisions that we make. Comments may be general or related to the topics we're discussing tonight. Please note that comments are limited to 5 minutes. Jared, has anyone signed up to make general public comments?
We have one person signed up to make a general audience comment. We have Ken K.
Ken, go ahead. In person? Great, thanks.
Is this on, or do I need to push the button? There, okay. Thank you. Hello, my name is Ken Koenigsmark, and I'm representing Our Savior Lutheran Church tonight, which is at 745 Front Street South. We are one of the requests for a rezone, and we hope you're all aware of our partnership effort with the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank to relocate their operation from right over here to our church property and to provide a new and better facility on our site. We're hopeful that deal will be sealed very soon. Their board is meeting to discuss it within the next week or 2 weeks, and we hope to have a decision. And I would add that in a review of their conceptual plan with Doug Yormick from the city, there were no issues identified, environmental or otherwise, that would prohibit their concept from being done. So our rezone request is based on this partnership and in support of future potential to do more than that, to perhaps become a hosting for a hub of social services, not just maybe the food bank, but like the Together Center in Redmond, a variety of social services co-located on one property, able to provide a host of services to those most in need in our community. And the rezone would enable that. It may also be needed for the food bank project because of the current height limit that affects our current zoning, but is increased with a multifamily zoning applied. And as you might imagine, a food bank has high ceilings and warehouse type stacking, and the extra ceiling limit may be needed. We're neither a developer or a landowner seeking a rezone simply for purposes of increasing the development value of our property. If anybody knows my record in the city, they would know that I am usually on the other side of these kind of issues, but in this case, for the common good, for the benefit of the city, for those most in need, I do believe a rezone is justified and very beneficial. So we're a church seeking a rezone to better provide community benefits and needed services for those most in need, which we as a church are already doing, and we partner with the food bank to the degree we can now in food drives and preparation for school year and so on. But a rezone would give us greater opportunity to do much more tomorrow. This is all directly supportive of the goals of the city's Human Services Strategic Plan, which does envision, hopefully, a hub of social services at one site, hopefully close to the downtown core. We fit the bill perfectly, but this can only happen with a rezone. All these are laudable reasons for a rezone, but I want to also emphasize how legitimate, logical, and practical, justifiable a rezone is simply based on the map included in your pre-meeting packet. If you didn't see that, it shows that our property seeking a rezone is an isolated island of single-family zoning surrounded by multifamily high in the dark brown, multifamily medium in the hashed brown. It's out of place. It abuts Inge Johnson Park, but if you then look at what the rezone would accomplish, it completes the picture as it should be. That should be multifamily like everything else around 75% of the property. And it is in keeping with the character and nature of the neighborhood that already exists. We urge PPC to follow the staff recommendation, which is to approve the rezone. That will, again, benefit the goals of the food bank, the city, and our church to bring something that benefits the least in our community and to help them as much as we can in meeting their needs as well as the goals of the city. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jared, is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Just giving a second for online listeners. No one else has raised a hand at this time.
Okay. Give it a second. And then we've been joined by Chair Voice virtually, so I will pass it over to him to introduce our next item on the agenda. And we can't hear you, Jason. You might be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for bearing with me. It's been so long since I've had to do this that I didn't realize the event password was, anyway. So I have been fighting with my Mac, and I finally got in through the back door. Thank you, Vice Chair. I appreciate that. As you can all tell, I have an unrelenting cold, which is the reason I am not there with you this evening. You might even be able to hear it in my voice. So in the interest of everybody's health, I decided to stay home. But I do want to thank Vice Chair Bader for taking the torch and running with it. Sometimes these live hybrid events can be kind of funny. So we have moved along from public comment. So the next item on the agenda is our regular business. It is the public hearing regarding the proposed 2022 Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Map amendments. Tonight, staff will be presenting proposed redesignations and rezones. Following each presentation, PPC will be asking clarifying questions, and then the public will have an opportunity to comment on the proposal, and then the PPC will deliberate and vote. Before we begin the public hearing, I would like to state the fact that in the interest of maintaining an appearance of fairness and due to the proximity of where I live in regards to two rezones, I will be recusing myself from the Wildwood and the Our Savior Lutheran Church rezones this evening. I'll be handing it over to Vice Chair Bader. And in the interest of a seamless meeting, I'm going to pass it off to her for the Newport rezone as well, but I will be participating in that vote. So having said that, I will now pass it off to Vice Chair Bader.
Great, thanks so much, Jason. And just to be clear for our commissioners, Commissioner Kennedy, you'll vote in all three votes tonight. Commissioner Longoria, you'll vote on the Wildwood, as well as the Our Savior Lutheran Church rezone proposals once Jason recuses himself. So just to be clear, what's going to happen there. Okay, so let's kick this off. So we'll start with the Newport area rezone, and Kristen, go ahead with your presentation whenever you're ready.
Good evening. So I'm going to do a little background information first before we start the discussion of the individual rezones, because we do have some new members with us here tonight, and it's just always good to do. So we are talking, and I'm Kristen Leeson, Senior Planner with the Community Planning and Development Department. So we are talking about the 2022 proposed comprehensive plan and zoning map amendments. The purpose tonight is we will present, and then we will take public comment, and then the Planning Policy Commission will deliberate and provide recommendations on the proposed amendments. Our process tonight is going to be a little bit different, but not too different than we usually do it, just because of the different recommendations. So the way we're going to do it, we're going to present the first proposed amendment, and then the Planning Policy Commission will ask any clarifying questions. No deliberation at that time, just questions on things maybe you didn't understand. Then we will take public comment, and once that is closed, then the Planning Policy Commission, someone needs to make a motion, someone needs to second. Once that is done, you all can deliberate, and then you will vote on the first proposed amendment. And then we're going to do it all over again for 2 and for 3, okay? So you all may remember, some of you don't, that back in January of 2022, we brought a docket of proposed amendments to you. This is what lists our potential things that we're going to look at during the year. And you all make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council makes the final decision. So these 3 rezones came to us. Our initial recommendation was not to do it. We have Title 18 going on, and there was just a lot to do. But our City Council said, nope, we're going to move forward with these, so here we go. And we will get into each of these in a minute. So I want to be clear, there are 2 things that could potentially change with your votes tonight. One is the land use designation map for these 3 parcels. The other are the zoning designations for these. The difference between the 2 is these land use designations, this isn't all of them, but the land use designations here are sort of an umbrella. And underneath each one of these umbrellas, hence the umbrella, under each one of these are different zones. So the land use designation says, these are the zones that are going to fall in here. This is kind of the character that we want. And then the zones have the development and design standards that are attached to those. Those get into the specifics. So there are different types of rezones. So the first one does not require a comprehensive plan amendment, which means that the zoning falls within one of these categories. So say they want to go from single-family estate to single-family small lot, those happen to both fall into this box. So that can happen at any time during the year. The other kind, the kind that you're looking at tonight, require comprehensive plan amendments. So those do not fall within the category. So those, for example, maybe someone wants to zone from conservancy residential to multifamily high. Well, those are in 2 different buckets of land use designations. So that requires a comprehensive plan amendment at the same time. They request a land use designation change. And so this can only occur once a year, which is why these are happening at the same time. So in this case, we have one property that the recommendation is to move it from, or the request is to move it from community facilities recreation all the way down here to village residential, which is in multifamily residential. And then there are 2. The request is to move them from single-family small lot in low-density residential down to this category, multifamily residential. There are also criteria that go with this that we are required to look at. There are 9 different criteria, so they bear a relation to public health, safety, and welfare, or other community benefit. Have we met our growth targets? And if they haven't been met, then that's good. We can approve it, or that's one of the things we look at. Have there been changed circumstances regarding the parcel? Is this property suitable for development under the proposed zoning? Will it be materially detrimental to the surrounding properties? Is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? I talked about those zoning designations, or is it in the concurrent process of getting a change or requesting a change like these are? Does it comply with all the applicable city codes and regulations? Are there or can there be adequate public facilities provided on the site? And are there potentially probable adverse environmental impacts? And if so, can they be mitigated or are they acceptable? I put this in here because it came up last time. You all asked about growth targets. And so as I mentioned, one of the criteria is, can it be approved It can be approved if the Growth Management Act, GMA, housing growth targets have not been met. So our 2019 to 2044 housing growth targets is 3,500 new units. And I promised new members that at some point we will get into all of what this means, but you'll just have to trust me for now. There's a lot to it. But we are required to accommodate 3,500 new units. We actually have the capacity for 12,159 new units. So while we have not met yet, we have not built 3,500 new units, we do have the capacity to do it. So, we don't need to upzone to allow for more housing. So another thing that we look at is highest and best use. So we look at all uses that are permitted within the proposed zone. These are not tonight's, these are just a sample for you all to look at. It was for me a few years ago. But we looked at the mixed use and what was allowed there, and then at the urban core use and what additional uses might be allowed in there. We also look at development standards. So how tall can the building be? What's the impervious surface on a site under the existing zoning, and how would that change under the proposed zoning? Any questions so far? Okay. Good, because I'm moving on. So we're going to start talking about the Newport area. And so this one, you can kind of throw a lot of what I just said out the window because it doesn't apply to this one. So this is a technical change. So I've explained it. I will explain this again. So last year, we were asked to rezone this parcel that ended in the last three numbers, 107. And when we went onto the map and pulled it up, this is what showed up as parcel 107. So we sent the parcel number and the picture to City Council. It was approved. It was rezoned from village residential to community facilities. And what happened was, why we had it in the first place, was that when Anthology developed, they were required to give us parkland or space for parkland. They did that. We looked at this piece. What happens was, we looked at this piece and said, oh, we don't need it. It's not beneficial for us. It's being used for utilities, stormwater, and it's going to be an entrance to Anthology. What we didn't know was that this had been decided back in 2019, and this little portion right here with the dot around it, there was a lot line adjustment, and it was placed back into this big parcel right here. So it's that this one is actually a part of this one, but we didn't know that when the rezone took place. So it never should have been rezoned. And it needs to go back to village residential to match the rest of the parcel. So here's what it looks like today, right there. And this is what it looks like from the ground. And as I mentioned, the current use, the utilities, stormwater vault, and an entrance to Anthology. And this won't change because they need the stormwater vault there and the utilities. So our recommendation is to approve the land use and zoning designation changes for this property from community facilities to multifamily residential and from community facilities recreation to village residential. Okay. So now we are going to see if you all have any questions.
For our virtual commissioners, any questions? Okay. Looks like no questions.
Okay.
So I should open the public comment, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I will open the floor for public comment at 6:53 p.m. Please remember that each person has 5 minutes to speak if we have anyone signed up. So Jared, has anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, we have several. First, we have Brad Book, who is online, I believe. He's written first on the sign-up
Yes.
sheet.
Okay. I just know that he is here to speak on a different topic.
Okay.
So, and I have a feeling that most of them are. But you can ask, I'm not positive about that one, so you.
Okay. Is there anybody online that would like to make a public comment at this time? If so, raise your hand. I'll give you a few seconds. No one has indicated that they would like to speak online.
Great. And just to clarify, we'll have public comment after each, for each proposed rezone. So we'll come back to the list. Okay, so it sounds like no public comments, so I'll close the public comment portion of this public hearing at 6:54 p.m. And in order to begin deliberations on this topic, someone must first make a motion and it must be seconded. So PPC, would anyone like to make a motion?
Chair, I would like to make a motion to approve the findings of fact in our packet for amendment number 1.
Okay, and
A second.
thank you, Nina. So the motion is to approve the findings of fact for amendment, or, yeah, I'm just saying, I have to read it. Following my script here. Would anyone like to comment on the motion? Virtual commissioners, any comment? Okay, so if no one would like to comment, then we'll take a vote. So the motion on the floor is to adopt. Thanks, Joyce.
The motion is to adopt the findings of fact for amendment number 1.
So the motion on the floor is to adopt the finding of facts for amendment number 1.
Excuse me, may I expand a bit on that? And that's to rezone parcel 20240691119 from commercial community facilities to multifamily residential, and a rezone from community facilities recreation to village residential.
As long as I don't have to repeat that, we are good. So all in favor of the motion to recommend, please raise your hand. Okay, so we have 5 in the room. I see Commissioner Voice has his hand raised as well. So that's 1, 2, 3. So we have 6 in the room, 7. So that's 7 yays. Any all opposed? We all voted yay, so I'm assuming no. So the motion passes with a vote of 7-0. So I will now ask Chair Voice to step away. And so staff will make him an attendee, and we'll move ahead with the public hearing on the Wildwood proposal. And so Commissioner Longoria, since you are our kind of alternate tonight, you'll be serving as a voting member, as I mentioned before, on the next 2 items. So we'll move on to the Wildwood rezone. And again, Kristen, go ahead with your presentation.
I am handing this one over to Valerie Porter.
Okay, thanks, Valerie.
Hello, my name is Valerie Porter. I'm Associate Planner with the Community Planning and Development Department. So the next rezone we'll be discussing is the parcel located on Wildwood Boulevard. This parcel is vacant and it's located within the Squaw Mountain subarea. It's about 4 acres in size. Next slide, please. So the applicant is requesting the parcel's land use designation be changed from low density residential to multifamily residential, and the zoning from single family small lot to multifamily medium. As you can see from the maps, the single family development is located on the east and the west side of the parcel, while the development to the south is multifamily. So changing the zoning to multifamily would extend multifamily development into the single family neighborhoods. Next slide. So the image on the left shows the entire parcel, which is divided by 1 single family lot. The 2 images on the right show the close proximity of Squaw Mountain Access Trail, which runs parallel along the west side of the site, which is the walkway in the pictures. And this image also shows that the site is heavily vegetated. Next slide. So this slide shows the uses that are allowed in the single family small lot zones. Should the parcel be rezoned to multifamily medium, the list on the bottom of the slide would be allowed in addition to the list above. So some of the new uses would include a high school, a library, a triplex housing, and an apartment. Next slide. So this slide shows the proposed district standards and the existing. So if you're looking at the chart, you can see that the district standards are pretty much the same, but the main difference is the maximum density that's allowed on the parcel and the minimum lot size. Next slide. So next I'm going to discuss the environmental constraints impacting this site. So according to City GIS and not a on-site survey, approximately 80% of the site is encumbered by critical areas and their associated buffers. City records show over half of the site being impacted by steep slopes and associated buffers, which is the image on the left. So all steep slopes have a 50-foot buffer unless a geotech report has been provided demonstrating that the buffer can be reduced. This information typically is confirmed with development, should development occur on the site. So the applicant would be required to provide a site survey and a geotechnical report for the city to review. The image on the right, the image on the right shows the location of two streams impacting the site. The first stream, which runs east and west on the site, is a Class 3 stream with a 50-foot buffer. And the second stream, which is Issaquah Creek, is located off-site along the east side of the site and has been classified as a Class 1 stream with a 100-foot buffer. It's also worth noting that all of these critical areas have a 15-foot building setback line that's starting from the edge of the buffer. So should development occur, it could not occur within 150 feet, 15 feet of the ordinary high water mark of Issaquah Creek. Next slide. So Issaquah Creek is one of 3 streams regulated by the Shoreline Master Program, and due to the site's location to Issaquah Creek, portions of the site are regulated by the Shoreline Master Program and has been classified as Issaquah Creek Urban Conservancy Environmental Area. In this particular environmental area, single-family development cannot be constructed within 100 feet of the Issaquah Creek's ordinary high water mark, and multifamily development cannot be constructed within 200 feet of Issaquah's ordinary high water mark. So the image on the left shows the 200-foot buffer from the center of Issaquah Creek. And the image on the right shows all critical area constraints impacting the site. The area in green is considered developable area, and then the area in gray is undevelopable area. So if you're looking at the image, you can see that the developable area is limited, but this is just an estimate. Next slide, please. During the September 29th meeting, a few questions were raised. One question was about the discrepancy in the staff report, which has been revised. So just to be clear, commercial uses are not allowed within 100 feet of the Issaquah Creek, and multifamily development are not allowed within 200 feet of Issaquah Creek. The second question was regarding the Shoreline Master Program and whether or not there was some flexibility in some of the requirements. An applicant can apply for a variance with the city, but the final decision is actually made by the Department of Ecology. And the third question had to do with health and safety. So there was a question, and this rezone request does not hinder public health, safety, welfare, or community benefits, but any development proposed on site must comply with all applicable public health and safety standards. Next slide. So after reviewing everything, staff will not be recommending approval for the land use and zoning designation changes here because the site does not meet all the approval criteria, specifically number 2 and number 4, which are listed in the staff report. The proposed rezone does not provide a public health, safety, welfare, or other community benefit, and no circumstance on the site has changed, and it's not appropriate for regional development due to the Shoreline Master Program requirements. Also, many of the parcels surrounding the site are single-family lots, so changing the site to multifamily would not be compatible with surrounding uses. And then also, due to the environmental constraints impacting the parcel is not appropriate for multifamily development. Next slide. So before we take questions, I just want to point out that the commission has received several comments received via email, and there was also a petition just recently sent just a few minutes before the meeting that I believe we'll be sharing with you guys. And that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Valerie. I think we have kind of a general question here about what the petition is about.
The petition was from a community member who is against rezoning the Wildwood Boulevard site. And it looks like it's a 2-page petition from residents within the neighborhood.
Thank you. Commissioners, any clarifying questions?
Hey Valerie, Joy here. I'm a little stuck on the petition right now. Maybe you can help me out. Without seeing what you're talking about in front of me, isn't that third-party hearsay? We're able to take comments from people individually. I guess it's more of a point of order, but to have someone collect the opinions of other community members and then represent them is a different format. So we
I'm going to
received-
defer to someone in the chambers, Kristen or Minnie.
We've received many comments. I'm so grateful for the community involvement that we've had in this process. We've certainly read the emails that we've gotten, but a petition represented by one member representing multiple people would not be something we would consider, other than the one member would say, I have the opinions of others. But to present it as a formal petition, I don't think that.
So for the record, this is Minnie Dhaliwal, Community Planning and Development Director. I think what Valerie's referring to is an email that was sent out to all the Planning and Policy Commission members. And there are signatures in the petition from all the property owners that are objecting to the rezone. So it is part of the record for you to consider. And, you know, we're happy to bring it up on the screen if you'd like to see the actual email. Since it just came in before your meeting, so I don't know how many of you actually had a chance to
I
look
have
at your email.
not. So if you feel it's
Okay,
germane.
Valerie, do you have access
germane
to
to
your?
us, we would
Okay.
love to have more details.
It's booty.
Oh, did you print it out? Okay, I've got it right here. I can share it real quick. Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. That's the end of it. So there are about 17 names on here. Well, 17 addresses. Yeah. And I can show you the email as well. Oops. It stopped sharing. 1 second. Do you mind if I just read you the email? Okay, thank you. Dear PPC and council members, and this came in at 5:53 today. Dear PPC and council members, several residents on Ridgewood Circle and Wildwood Boulevard got together to sign a petition against rezoning of Wildwood Boulevard. We feel strongly that this would be an unwise move given the amount of land and previous erosion. We hope that you factor our petition into your discussion on this matter. Happy to email or deliver petition if you need it. Signed, Dr. Martina Dove.
Thank you. That is very helpful. I have a question for Valerie or for Kristen, and it's about our findings of fact tonight. I'm looking at page 77 of 83, and we have a statement of whereas environmental review was done on the proposed amendment and a determination of non-significance for a non-project action was issued on September 30th of 2022 for this amendment. The comment period for this decision ended on October 13th of 2022, and the appeal period ends on October 28th of 2022. I was hoping that you could go over a little bit about the language of that and how it pertains to the two amendments we have in front of us.
The three amendments you have in front of you?
Well, we've already voted on
Yes,
one.
okay.
We only have two more in front of us.
Are you asking about the environmental checklist, or are you asking about findings of fact?
I'm asking about findings of fact.
Okay, so findings of fact lists, it's a record of what's been done, and it is eventually sent to the city council. So in the findings of fact, we always send the city council or the Planning Policy Commission a draft, and then it is amended as necessary, or if it's perfect, then it gets signed. But it states that we had a draft docket, PPC heard it, council took action. We then followed up. We did our research, we sent the information to Department of Commerce, State Department of Commerce. We notified property owners with 300 feet, we advertised it in the paper, we presented it to PPC for discussion, it just does everything. Held a public hearing, sent it to council, or that we're sending to council. And then based on all the information in the staff reports and what we have found, these are the Planning Policy Commission's recommendations. That gets signed and it goes to council. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I think it's important to point out the thoroughness that's been going on, and so I think sometimes some of these wordings need to be pointed out a little bit to help us remember everything that goes into some simple wording.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions? Any commissioners? You're virtual.
I have one statement regarding the document where you received at 5:53 p.m. Is there a protocol on how many names we would have to receive on one of those documents? Or just for consideration?
It's just for consideration. I think if you were trying to turn it into a bill or some kind of a law, then yes, there has to be a certain number. But for this, it's just a representation.
Very
And
well.
right.
Thanks.
Any last call for clarifying questions? Okay, so hearing none, we'll now move into public comment. And so I will open the floor for public comments at 7:10 p.m. And please remember that each person has 5 minutes to speak. So Jared, has anyone from the public signed up to speak on the Wildwood proposal?
Yes, we do. We have several in room and several online, so would it be possible if we could get a show of hands within the room and online who would like to talk about Wildwoods tonight? Sure. Please state your
Dave
name for the
Ricketts.
record.
I live at, can you hear me? Yeah, I live at 385 Front Street, and we have some concerns about the Wildwood project, and that is there's 2 year-round streams. I heard her mention there's one, but there's 2 that come down off the hillside, and there's a mine shaft below the subject property. There's surface water runoff that we have seen every year, and there's limited site retention possibility for the surface water runoff. We're concerned the impervious surface of multifamily will create more of a problem for the river below. There is a steep slope. We've seen landslides on the property, and we're just not sure that it's a great piece of property to be developed in multifamily, because you're adding to the density of construction on a piece that already is very fragile environmentally. Thank you.
Alrighty, we have 2 people online. We have David Toyer, who indicated he would like to speak, and we also have Peter Condile. So, Peter, I am going to make you a panelist. Just make sure to lower your hand when you're done, and you should see the option to unmute when I make you a panelist. Alrighty, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. For the record, my name is Peter Condilis with Toyer Strategic Advisors. We represent the applicant. I sent a letter into the commission earlier this week, so I don't want to go over all that in the interest of time, but I did want to just go over a few key points before you make your decision this evening. The slide that Valerie showed with the little green boxes that shows the portion of the site that's usable is really important here, because it's not like there's going to be a bunch of development all over the site. It's really just a small portion of the site that's actually developable, and that there'll actually be seen any difference. It's far away from any slopes. It's far away from the stream. And it's further down the road from the single family, closer to the portion of Wildwood that is already zoned multifamily. So it's not like there's going to be major apartment complexes up and down this corridor. It's really just a corner of this property. And then, there was a question at the last meeting from one of the commissioners, I don't remember which one it was, about the flexibility that the rezone gives. And that's, I think, the key reason that the owner is seeking a rezone. It just gives more flexibility what can be done with the site, the type of housing that can be put there, just because the single family zoning puts kind of limitations on there, and he would like to have a little bit more flexibility with that respect. And then finally, there was a few comments last meeting about this proposal's connection to the Central Issaquah plan and how it relates to that. And I think that it bears repeating, as I said in my letter, though, that any development that were to take place on the Wildwood site would not hinder development in the Central Issaquah area. Housing is housing, and more housing is a good thing, especially multifamily housing that creates a diversity of housing, for people that are maybe just getting into the market or lower income. So these two areas can work in concert with each other to create a more diverse housing stock in Issaquah, and I think that both at the end of the day would be helpful for the city. So that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Next, we have Brad Book. I'm going to make you a panelist now. Please lower your hand once you're done speaking, and then I will let you know when you can go ahead and start. You are now a panelist.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for taking the time to hear us out on this. My name is Brad Book. I reside on Ridgewood Circle, and I've been living on Squawk Mountain now for just over 38 years. I'm here to oppose the rezone of Wildwood Boulevard. And just for further transparency, I want to make it clear that I am not here representing the park board. However, I have been a member of the park board now for over 10 years, which gives me a different perspective on our land use management in the city. Really, one of the main things, I really probably could make this a lot briefer because it doesn't look like the city is actually recommending this from what Valerie said, but I'll still make a few comments. Issaquah has been evolving over the years to provide different types of diversity of housing. And essentially we have 5 different zones. Old Town, Squawk Mountain are the older zones and have predominantly been single-family housing for a long time. More recently, we have Talus and the Highlands, which have created more diversity and more multifamily housing. And also the Central Issaquah plan was essentially developed to allow further development and growth in Issaquah, and primarily is going to be set up for higher density multifamily housing. I think the main thing that I would want to say about neighborhood character is that there's an importance to preserve the character that is within each zone. And I think by adding multifamily housing on Squawk Mountain would deplete its advantage to the city, and certainly its character within the neighborhood. There is some multifamily housing in the area just south of this, Raleigh, which has been there for decades, and Calcari, which also have been there for a long time and is currently developing further. The key thing there is that both of those developments are tucked away far off, for the most part, off of Wildwood Boulevard and not noticeable as you come up the city road. Wildwood Boulevard is one of the main entry points into the Squawk Mountain area, and I think it would be, frankly, an eyesore to actually have multifamily housing at one of the entry points to Squawk Mountain. This is a gateway area, quite frankly, into Squawk Mountain, both for Squawk Mountain residents as well as the Squawk Mountain Trail. And so higher density housing along those two areas just does not seem to be very suitable. I think one of the most important factors is capacity. Central Issaquah essentially was designed for more multifamily housing, and it doesn't seem like there's been as much effort or emphasis to make that occur. And I think if we start changing zoning into areas that are already single-family housing, we're never going to get to a point of actually developing Central Issaquah like it was intended. So I think that the capacity shows that there's plenty of opportunity for developers to put in multifamily housing in the valley floor without penetrating into single-family housing areas like Squaw Mountain. It's already been stated, there are certainly some environmental issues here. This entire property is adjacent to Issaquah Creek. There has been a prior landslide significantly on this property back in 1989. I think that increasing to higher density is very challenging in this area. Probably one of the last things I like to mention is the Park Strategic Plan that was adopted in 2018. Part of that plan was to preserve forested hillsides and our waterways.
Mr. Book, your 5 minutes has expired.
Okay, one last comment.
Yep.
Okay, and one additional item that's already in the part of master planning is a creek corridor and part of the Green Necklace. The Creek corridor is intended to have a trail system that runs from Squaw Valley Park all the way to Lake Sammamish State Park. And any multifamily housing entered close to the Issaquah Creek corridor would certainly be adverse to that intention. I hereby request that the PPC not accept a rezone of this area. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Next, we have Ilyana Maranov. I will make you a panelist. Just remember, you may lower your hand when you're finished speaking, and you also may turn on your video if you would like. Alrighty, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Yuliana Marinov. I live at 185 Southwest Hepler Lane. I've been here for 16 years. I'm here to oppose the rezoning of the Wildwood Boulevard. I have three main reasons, and I'll go fast. I have three young daughters that walk, run, and ride their bikes up and down this path along the side of the road on Wildwood Boulevard, and I'm concerned that developing that will impact my family. I also see a lot of wildlife that goes up and down Hepler Lane towards Wildwood Boulevard and crosses the street to reach the stream. And there's bears, there's deer, there's a lot of wildlife that passes through that zone. And I'm concerned that developing it further would prevent them from reaching the food and water they need. And then the third reason is that the road, the Wildwood Road, is small. And so I'm concerned about increased traffic. That's all. Thank you.
Next, we have David Toyer. I will make you a panelist, and you should see the option to unmute, and I will let you know when you can go ahead and speak. Alrighty, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. David Toyer with Toyer Strategic Advisors. I also work with the applicant for the Wildwood rezone, and wanted to address a couple of items here this evening in addition to what my colleague Peter Condelius covered earlier. The first of it is that regardless of zoning on this site, the development area of the site is the development area. So when it develops in the future, whether it develops under the existing zone or the future zone, what part of that site will be developable is the part that's developable. The zoning that's applied does not change that. Additionally, I know there's been a number of concerns that have been raised here this evening about things like landslides or critical areas and those sorts of things. All of those particular items are items that are reviewed during the development review process, and they're backed up with studies and analysis that's performed by the applicant and reviewed by technical professionals, either at the city or that the city retains. And so those things are always questions regardless of development, whether it's this site or a different site, and those things get addressed through the development review process, not through the rezoning process. I think the other two things that are really critical in my mind is I do not agree with staff's staff's findings, is specifically in criteria 2 and criteria 4. The criteria 2 addresses whether it bears a substantial relationship to the public health, safety, and welfare or other community benefit. I think there's a number of community benefits. One, housing. We have a substantial housing shortfall throughout the entire region, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of units. And having a dramatic amount of diversity is really key and important to this. And multifamily housing that would develop at this site will be distinctly different from the type of multifamily housing that would develop in the Central Issaquah plan, and they're not competition with each other. Additionally, this presents an opportunity at this site to locate some additional housing units close to some existing trails, close to existing transit, very close walking distance to a number of your small businesses in that particular portion of your community that I'm sure would love to have some more people willing to walk down and spend money in their stores and their restaurants and et cetera. And also the fact that you would redevelop this site with additional housing units takes some of the pressure off of other development sites and potential for displacement of folks that are in more affordable housing. As far as changed circumstances go, one of the biggest changes is that there's been no change at all. We still have a housing deficit throughout the region, and we're trying to address that. And so if we don't start making actual changes to zoning policies and zoning designations, we're not going to be able to actually address the problem that we've gotten ourselves into as a region. It's not just an Issaquah problem, it's an everywhere problem. Proving this rezone gets us closer to solving some of those challenges. The other thing that we submitted an exhibit with our original application. I believe we resubmitted it in one of our recent comment letters as well. There are 11 other multifamily housing developments that are within the immediate vicinity of this site. And this site abuts other zones of the same nature of what we're asking to go to. It is not abnormal for the area. It's not inconsistent with what is already in that area. Again, I just want to emphasize that because it's been brought up regarding tree canopy and a variety of other things, the developable portion of this site is developable. And regardless of what the zoning is, that developable area of the site is not going to change. It's how well we maximize the efficiency of the development that goes there and creating housing units that contribute to the diversity of unit types that are needed in Issaquah and throughout the region. And we really hope that you'll see the bigger, broader picture on this and understand that this is a key part of supporting your community. And we outlined in another one of our recent letters consistency with the mobility master plan and a variety of other planning efforts that the city has gone through. This rezone really works in concert with all of that, and it should not be viewed as competition against other development opportunities in the city of Issaquah. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Alrighty, that was the last individual online who indicated that they would like to speak at this time.
Great, so we'll do one final call if there's anyone else who would like to speak. If so, please raise your hand. In the room, seeing none. If attending virtually, you can raise your virtual hand or let us know through the chat. You get any takers?
We have no takers.
Okay. So if there are no more public comments, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing at 7:28 p.m. So it's now time for us to deliberate on this. And so in order to begin deliberations on this topic, someone must first make a motion and it must be seconded. PPC, anyone like to make a motion?
Sorry, may I interrupt before a motion is made?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to bring the commissioner's attention to the agenda packet, page 12. That actually has staff's recommendation, and I just want to be clear that it's number 4 criteria that doesn't meet, that this project doesn't meet. And I think that will help with the motion as well.
Thanks, Valerie. Do we have a motion, or is a motion being prepared?
I'm going to make the same motion. I'm going to make, because I'm going to make Kristen actually say all of my fancy parcel numbers for me, for our esteemed court reporter who does such an excellent job. I'm going to make a motion to approve the findings of fact for amendment number 2 regarding the land use map and zoning map of the Wildwood parcel. If you want, I can go ahead and read off that it's 33240692121.
So then the recommendation would be to not approve the
Correct.
redesignation rezone of parcel number 33240692121, the land use designation from multifamily, from low density residential to multifamily residential, and the, excuse me, zoning, I'm doing this off the top of my head, the zoning designation from single family small lot to multifamily medium.
I'll second.
Great, thank you, Commissioners Lewis and Milligan. And so we have a motion on the floor. Would anyone like to comment?
Okay, thank you. I have seconded the motion indicating perhaps that I agree with the recommendation from staff to not approve this rezone. And I'm trying to find my notes in here because you made me go to page 12 when I was on page 24. And that, you know, I really appreciate all the comments that were made and the information that was provided. But there's, this is a site-specific rezone, and we have very specific criteria by which we can make a determination. And the staff has pointed out number 2 and number 4, which I tend to agree with them. But I would also like to add that growth controls, number 3, make this so that it does not comply with the criteria. To say that we have not met our housing targets that are yet over 20 years in advance is irrelevant to this. The capacity for us to meet our housing targets is 4 times as much as what is required, and it's all in the Central Issaquah plan. So I would just add for consideration that number 3, as well as number 2 and 4, make it so that we are not able to approve because the approval criteria requires, and let me read from the packet, a zone request shall be granted only if all the following approval criteria are met. My comment, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Milligan. Any other comments?
I think that was very well stated. I also agree with the opinion of staff for this particular rezone, and I don't find that it meets the criteria that we apply to this. What I would encourage the applicant to do is to think about if council should agree with our recommendations, whatever that be. The applicant think of different ways to go about this parcel. Lot line adjustments, being able to put a piece of the property into conservation. There's a lot of different ways that they can still achieve their goals, be a part of the community, and be able to be working together. And I think that this parcel for this application just does not meet our criteria in particular, but that doesn't mean that there isn't more to be done to be able to have a productive use of this parcel.
And I would add as well, based on our growth plan in the city, and to focus more on Central Issaquah as well for that growth. And I'm sure the area can still be developed to a certain extent within its current land use and rezone as well.
May I quickly interrupt and just clarify that the site does meet number 2, it just doesn't meet number 4.
Thanks, Valerie. Any other last call for commissioner comments?
I just want to thank Valerie for pointing that out.
Yeah. Okay, so hearing none, if no one else would like to comment, then we'll take a vote. And so the motion on the floor, and I'll ask those to correct me if I get anything wrong here, I'm going to kind of abbreviate all of that, is to approve the findings of fact for proposal number 2, which is to not approve the rezone as stated in our packets for the what we're calling the Wildwood parcel. Okay, so all in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. Okay, so I see 6 in the room, and we also have Commissioner Longoria virtually raising her hand. So that's 7. Wait, I think we did that wrong, right? We just all voted to approve the motion. I'm with you. I'm there. Okay, so we have 7 to recommend. Given that we all voted to recommend, I'll assume that none of us are voting, changing our votes to a nay. So that motion passes with a vote of 7-0. Okay, at this point, we are going to come to the Our Savior Lutheran Church proposal next. I'm going to request that we take a brief 5-minute pause, and we will get on with our agenda as soon as that 5 minutes is over, so at 7:40.
Alrighty, we'll go ahead and restart here.
Great. All right, welcome back, and thank you for bearing with us, or me especially, during that break. So we're going to go to the final rezone we have this evening, which is for the Our Savior Lutheran Church property. So Kristen, go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, I'm back, and as a reminder, excuse me, I'm Kristen Leeson, Senior Planner with the Community Planning and Development Department. And yes, I'm about to talk about Our Savior Lutheran Church. It's about 3.35 acres on Front Street South. It is currently low-density residential, and the property owner is requesting to be multifamily residential. The current zoning is single-family small lot, and they are requesting multifamily high. And as you can see, here's the parcel, single-family small lot. To the north is city-owned property, community facilities, open space. To the sort of northeast and to the south and east is multifamily high, and to the west is multifamily medium. These are all condominiums and apartments. This is a nursing home, condominiums and apartments over here, and as I mentioned, open space. Here you have the aerial view. Here's the church, the existing church. There's also a single-family house on the property back here. The church also owns this property right here, which is currently used for parking. It is zoned multifamily high. And here's a street view. You have the list of uses in single family that could go here, from housing, churches, obviously, daycare centers, sports fields, office, up to 4,000 square feet. The additional uses would include denser residential development, including triplex, fourplex, and multifamily, assisted living, library. I don't think it's big enough for a driving range, but that's a possibility. And a grocery store up to 4,000 square feet, and also high schools and colleges. The development standards here, they're a little bit different. So the single family, well, I put the wrong one on here, I apologize. Single family small lot would actually allow for about 14 and a half dwelling units per acre. And the height, it's 50% and 50%. The multifamily high would allow 29 dwelling units per acre, and would, the maximum height there is 40 feet. It's currently under single family small lot, just like single family suburban, it's 30 feet. It's under 40 feet under this one, with a maximum of potentially 65 feet, but in order to do that, the property owner would have to increase the pervious surface from 50% to 60%, which would reduce the developable property, and also would have to do step backs on the property as well. There are some other conditions that are included. There are some environmental constraints on this site. So this is adjacent to Issaquah Creek. And as Valerie mentioned, it falls within the Issaquah Creek Urban Conservancy Environmental District, which means that, or designation, which means that there's a 200-foot buffer here from the creek. And also, as Valerie mentioned, what we show here is from the center of the creek. But when a project comes in, it would be reevaluated and it would be looked at from the high water mark. And then there's an additional 15-foot buffer from that. So commercial properties are allowed within 100 feet from the creek, and residential or multifamily properties are allowed outside the 200-foot buffer. Oops, I did that wrong. So commercial families cannot go within 100 feet of the creek. Multifamily properties cannot go within 200 feet of the creek on this site. Single-family property is also 100 feet. There's a little bit of steep slope here. Let's see, the original buffer here is 100 feet on this creek. There is a little steep slope here that has a 50-foot buffer along with it. This over here shows the Urban Conservancy buffer of 200 feet on both sides. So again, Valerie mentioned these, but September 29th follow-up, I just went over the Issaquah Creek Urban Conservancy changes about multifamily within 200 feet and commercial within 100 feet. Shoreline variance, the city, it's processed through the city, but it's really the Department of Ecology who makes the final decision on whether or not certain uses would be permitted within that 200 feet. And then the health, safety, welfare, and community benefit, the city has determined that actually it does. This doesn't hinder public benefit, so it does meet that criteria. Community character, you all asked about that last time. The surrounding condominiums and apartments range anywhere, the condominiums and apartments were built anywhere from 1987 to 1990, so we don't have records on them, but based on what we know for 3-story apartments, they're generally about 35 to 45 feet in there. There's one that's a little bit taller. The nursing home to the south is just 20 to 25 feet. The church itself ranges from anywhere from about 20 to 30 feet. Any future development of surrounding properties, those that are zoned multifamily high, would also have to comply, this one and those would have to comply with all existing standards, which are a more pedestrian-friendly, sort of human scale kind of feel than they were back then. They may come closer to the street. I don't know. I don't know what would happen, but any of those could develop that way. And as I mentioned, increasing the height above the base height of 40 feet to potentially 65 feet would increase the minimum pervious surface from 50% to 60%, which then decreases the amount of buildable land and surface area of a building. Traffic, that also came up. How much traffic? Well, as I mentioned, you can't just look at one thing. You have to look at every possible use on the site. So we looked at existing single family, and if you were to have 10 units on this property, which is about what would fit, you'd have in the PM peak hours, which are from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., you'd have 9 additional trips. Multifamily, if you had 30 dwelling units, you'd have about 15 additional trips. Grocery store, which can only go up to 4,000 square feet, you might get 36 additional trips. Office space, about also 4,000 square feet, about 9 additional trips. And an animal hospital, veterinary clinic, 4,000 square feet, about 14 additional trips. You all also asked about conditions. Could it be conditions? So we have had ongoing conversations with our city attorney. They're not easy to do. They can be problematic, however, they can be done. So they must, however, be tied to the property for future owners. They would need to be related to the approval criteria, and they must be linked to evidence that there is something unique about this property in particular that warrants a condition being tied to it. So our recommendation is that this property meets the criteria, and we recommend approval of the land use designation and zoning. And I'll state it for you. It's a parcel, actually, I believe it's 3424069-119, from low-density residential to multifamily residential, and the zoning from single-family small lot to multifamily high. And happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry, Kristen, did you get the parcel number correct?
I don't have my piece of paper in front of me.
Yeah.
It does matter. It's in the findings of fact. It's the first 4 numbers I mess up every time. I can tell you really quickly. Let's see. 3424, yes, 3424069-217. You're right, I got it wrong, 217. Thank you for correcting me. Teach me. Okay. So now.
I have a question about the site.
Yes.
2 questions. Based on the map you showed us, is the current single-family home right now would be now in the buffer? Would you not be able to build that home where it is? When looking at the overlapping.
I know, I don't have one
map
that
to the
shows.
right. I was trying to compare my GPS map, and then I was trying to compare the overlays. Right now, would you be able to build a single-family home where it is right now?
Maybe half of it. It
Half of it.
looks like, and again, the buffer would probably extend out further than where we show it, and so probably not.
Okay.
Yeah.
What percentage of the site would you say right now is impervious surface?
Pardon, is impervious surface? Ooh.
Speaking as someone who's been on this site, it's pretty high, but I would love to have, if you guys have a recommendation of right now at the site, what you believe.
I hate to guess. I mean,
Yeah.
yours is as good as mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna call it pretty high, right? About 70%?
Maybe.
Yeah.
You can call it that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call it anything.
Thank you.
And then the adjacent lot that they're going to be developing, that's mainly pervious, I believe.
Right.
And another question there, the food bank that was proposed to be moved from its current location to over there, can it be moved with the current zoning? Or does the proposed zoning relegate it to be used?
The existing zoning would
Yeah.
allow for the food bank.
Okay.
Now, you all received a letter that says that they would like to go higher with the food bank than the existing zoning allows. But again, no application has been submitted, so that's a possibility.
Okay, and then from a traffic or pedestrian safety perspective, where the current food bank is and how people walk out of the facility and the proximity to, like if you're heading up to Clark Elementary and whatnot, would that benefit that area if that food bank was moved to the new area?
That's not something that I've looked at, because when we look at these, we look at every possible use and the best high intended use. We don't look at specific uses. So that's something that would be looked at when, if they came in with an application.
Okay, very well. That's it for me.
Not really a question, but can you go back to the condition slide, please?
This one? Oh, no, the condition slide. I apologize. There you go.
I'm curious, Kristen, it can be difficult, I think, sometimes to separate out the issues that are in front of us. And it's important, I think, to think about this property in terms of what we are possibly recommending, the allowed uses. And I'm curious how, because we would be changing this without any kind of conditions, regardless of who the applicant is and the fantastic wishes that we're so excited about to see on the property, without that tie to it. When we talk about the possibility of a rezone and a resell, let's say for the ability to then not do the state admission that is hopeful but not realized, how one of the things that I mentioned that I saw is a transit stop would be able to be added if we rezoned this into multifamily high. On our list of things that would change, it said transit stop.
So I missed that one. Transit stops are determined by Metro. They're not determined by the city.
Okay.
And transit stops require a lot of density.
Yeah.
A lot. So that's something that would have to be discussed with Metro. But I don't know.
Do you mind bringing back that slide that had the change that we would be going from to being multifamily high?
Sure. This one? Or?
Nope.
This one?
Yeah, so our changes, so a park and ride would now be able to be put on the site. And we, and then you want to also, the triplex, fourplex, 5+ would then be allowed on the site.
Right.
Based on the size of the site, if we added the adjoining site, since we have the two parcels as being one owner, what is the maximum amount of density if there was a resell?
Well, I mean, it's 29 dwelling units per acre, and then you need to factor in environmental constraints and parking, driveways. But that's why you look at the big picture.
Right.
Yeah. So,
thank you.
As they move further in the process from planning, and then if it gets past that, the city council to design, in looking at the list of uses that they could have right now on the screen, wouldn't it be limited to the acreage of the actual site? What they could actually do with the site as well, with the environmental factors as well?
Right. So any permitted uses that would be allowed now are limited to that property alone. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm asking, like, even though it states all of these things can be done, but given how much acreage is there.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So, yeah, like I mentioned, driving range probably isn't going to happen. That site's not big enough. Neither is a golf course. Baseball, soccer fields, probably not, because you need to factor in things like parking and lighting and all those other things that go. There's so many things that go into a project that have to be factored in.
Very well.
Just for the sake of clarity, even though it says Wildwood on the screen, that does apply still to our St. Lutheran, correct?
It does.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I do have a question, though. Commissioner Lewis mentioned the single-family home on the lot. I'm assuming that was a precursor to the master shoreline plan. Is that safe to say?
Yes.
Okay.
The plan was updated actually it was updated most recently in 2021, I believe.
Okay. So then if it did come down to redevelopment of that portion of the lot, that would not be able to be rebuilt on, is that correct?
Again, I don't know. I mean, what we've shown you is what we can do from GIS, and likely not. It would push it out probably past that house.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Just to note right now that house then would be there as a legally non-conforming use. So it's still legal to be there, yeah.
Any other clarifying questions?
Hi, this is Jamie online. I was wondering if you could go back to the slide that shows where those 200-foot places would be on either side of the property, the environmental factors.
Here you go. So this is my marker right here. So this is the 200 foot. Here's the center of the creek. So the high water mark would be further out from here. And then this is the 200 feet. Just for reference, this is 100 feet, and then that's the 200 feet over there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, last call for clarifying questions.
I just want to clarify the conditions. You mentioned that they're an option. They're not necessarily a favorite because they're challenging. Other than them being challenging, is there a reason to not put conditions on it?
I'm going to phone a friend.
So this is Minnie Dhaliwal for the record. So, like you asked the question at your last meeting, and so we've kind of given the information. It's not illegal to require these, but they can be problematic. If you want to go down the path and make a recommendation that you want to approve it with a condition, then it has to be tied to what criteria you feel is needed. What's so unique about this property. So they have to be done very carefully, generally for the public greater good. So, it's not meant as a contract so that you make a deal with a property owner to do things. So that's where it gets tricky. It also gets tricky when you're trying to implement it over the long part of years, right? So the property can sell, the new property owner, how would they know? We get a call at the front counter, what's allowed in the zone, and it shows one thing on the zoning. It's generally something that's recorded on the title of the property. So the implementation can be a challenge. But if you want to recommend with some conditions, they need to be thoughtful. They need to meet all these things of tying them to the criteria. So we just wanted to kind of get you the right information because this was a question asked at the last meeting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And I had asked that question at the last meeting, but I think based on what I've heard tonight, just to be clear, is that I think to Ame's point that even though all of those things are permitted uses under that land use designation, that the site really doesn't accommodate like, a brand new Amazon warehouse or something, right? Just because it's zoned that way.
Correct. Just because it says it can go there doesn't mean it can. It has to meet all the criteria.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, last call, take two for. Okay, so hearing No more clarifying questions. I'm now going to open the floor for public comments at 8 o'clock on the dot PM. And so please remember again that each person has 5 minutes to speak. So Jared, has anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, we have about 5 individuals on the in-house sign-in sheet. Will all those who are looking to speak tonight raise their hands in person and online? Perfect. We will go ahead and start in person with, I believe, Dave Ricketts, if you would like to speak. No? Ken K? Perfect.
Can you just hit the microphone button?
In concerns of any traffic, first, just remember that any proposal for development would have to go through all the normal process in which traffic would be evaluated. That's not an issue that really is to be addressed as part of the rezone. But I would also add, think about where the food bank is now, right here. Think about where the church is, about a block or two away. Whatever traffic is there at the food bank now is the same traffic that will be at our church. You're really not adding a traffic impact. In the future, yes, with a rezone, and if we can go a little higher, 30 feet is not very high with the existing zoning. 40 feet allows, if you dream big, things like the Together Center in Redmond, which is social services on the lower floor and a food bank with affordable housing above. I don't know if that will ever happen. It takes a lot of money, but it would give us the flexibility as a city and as a site to be able to do something like that. That's what this is all about. I can't ever imagine that that property would turn into condos or, you know, high-end apartments. That's not what anybody wants for that site. So that's where we're trying to go. That's what's behind it, and I urge your support.
Next, we have Gary Hansen.
My name is Gary Hansen, and I need to give my address. Is that it? Yeah, 1601 247th Avenue Southeast in Sammamish. A little better. I was on the team at my former church, Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church, that worked to recognize and acknowledge our ongoing community relationships during the process of merging with Our Savior Lutheran Church, which is the applicant for this rezone. Like Our Savior Lutheran Church, Shepherd of the Hills was a longtime community institution based right here in Issaquah for 30 plus years. There was always a shopping cart for the food bank, for food bank collections at the church. When Shepherd of the Hills was making the decision to join Our Savior, one of our most important considerations was ensuring that our congregation members would be able to maintain their strong support for and connection to Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank at Our Savior. Now that the merger has been completed and I am a member of Our Savior, I have been happy to see that this commitment is continuing just like we had hoped. I know that Our Savior Lutheran Church is steadfast and devoted in its work to bring its beloved campus to the greater service of the larger Issaquah community. This is why I hope you will support the church's application to allow rezoning.
Next up that we have written down is Josh Friedman.
Good evening. My name is Josh Friedman. I'm the attorney for Our Savior Lutheran Church. I had a few remarks written out, but I want to try and address some of the questions that came up earlier. So I'm throwing my plan out the window and going to try and give you some more information that I'm hoping will be helpful. One of the things that the commission asked about was impervious versus pervious on the site in the existing condition. A substantial part of the site is impervious as it's built now, simply because it was designed as a church, I believe in the early 1960s, when everybody who was going to church was going by car. A new development proposal, when one comes, if one comes, would be connected with the standards of today, both in terms of what the city will allow in its parking limits, in its pervious versus impervious, and of course in its shoreline-related setbacks of various kinds. So one of the things that's exciting about the property, just from a perspective of what's built there today, is if a redevelopment could happen, that would be an opportunity for more of the site to return to impervious conditions. Oftentimes, when someone goes up on a site that's widely paved, in order to go up, they need to restore laterally. So that's something that could, and I would presume be likely to happen in a future scenario where an applicant would want to build upward. Also, it was asked about whether a food bank could be permitted on the site in its existing zoning. That's correct. Food bank is permissible, just like a driving range or a golf course. Actually, no, you said that was the proposed zoning. It's not permitted there today. But I guess the metaphor still stands that the use is permitted. That doesn't necessarily mean that the site can accommodate it. So one of the reasons why our Savior is asking for the additional height is because food banks, to grow, need to use things like rooftop refrigeration. They need to use equipment like forklifts. The additional height of going from 30 to 40, we're hoping would give the food bank flexibility to grow in the medium term, in addition to potentially offering additional social services uses in the long term. I think that about covers it. I think your questions about maximum units and single-family home were pretty well answered. The single-family home that's there, I believe, was built as a parsonage as part of the original church campus, but probably would not be rebuilt if a new church was being built there today. And as well, the maximum units, the zoning sets the permissible density, but it doesn't actually tell you what can be built, because you have to look at, is the lot square or is it kind of wonky? How much access to the road does it have? Is there enough of a fire lane to safely fit 100 people there or only 10? So that's why the permissible density from a per unit occupancy perspective is not a complete measurement of what actually could be built there. The golf course or the grocery store is a good example. This new zoning would technically make a grocery store permissible. I wouldn't want to be the architect trying to shoehorn a grocery store onto that lot, and I can't imagine how it would ever be done, but that's why I'm not an architect. So thank you for considering the proposal. I can't speak to as compellingly to the church's commitment as its members have, so I hope you've had a chance to listen. And the church has been a neighbor to this creek, to this road, and to the community for 50 years on this site. They're not looking to cut and run, they're looking to expand their service in the future. So thank you for taking the time to consider this, and thank you for volunteering your service on the commission.
Alrighty, next up we have Lori S. looking to present.
Hi, I'm Lori Sperber. I live in Arlington Place, which is across the street on 700 Front Street South. And I am very, very, very much a person who stands behind helping their community, helping the poor, helping the unfortunate. And I'm all for the food bank. Our biggest concern is the fact that, and everybody keeps saying that nothing's gonna impact Front Street. But I would like to ask how many people get on Front Street at 6:30 in the morning and aren't getting let in because the volume of traffic coming from Hobart and out Hobart Issaquah Road is so full of people. The speed is increased because they're tired of sitting in the backup for endless, what should be a 15, 20-minute drive is now a 45-minute to an hour drive. I can sit there for 10 minutes in my driveway waiting to get out on that street to go to work. Coming home, it's even worse. I just want to go down to the country store to go get some small items instead of going into town. I can't get into traffic. Nobody will let me. They'll flip me off. They honk at me. They're not going to let you in. They don't want to deal with that traffic anymore. And unfortunately, Front Street has become the fourth transportation for people from the west side or the north side of I-90 to get to the south side of I-90. 900 is a parking lot. 405's a parking lot. And nobody wants to drive all the way up I-90 to get on Highway 18. Trying to get on Highway 18 is a parking lot. So they do go use Front Street. Granted, I know we've done studies, and probably 70% of the traffic on Front Street doesn't spend money in Issaquah. And I don't blame the city of Issaquah for saying, we're not going to spend the money to improve Front Street. We're not going to widen it because the money that we're putting forth, we're not recuperating because those people don't spend money in Issaquah. But I'm a homeowner, and I also lived here when the developer came to develop the Issaquah Highlands. And one of the stipulations that was made upon him was that he had to come up with a plan to improve the infrastructure up there, and he had to pay for it. And he came through for the Highlands. And the infrastructure up there is great. It boggles down when it gets back onto the city parts of Issaquah up there and down to the one lanes again. If they want to build something other than just moving the food bank over there, and I really, I appreciate the lawyer saying, oh, they're not going to do anything more than to build this phenomenal food bank over there with health care and everything else for these people and other resources, which I used to dedicate my time to the Hammond House in Seattle, which is a shelter for 50 homeless women. I would feed them. I would put Christmas bags together for them. So I'm part of that. I know all about that. I applaud it. But I don't believe that something's not going to happen down the road that's going to put multi-level living units on that property that is just going to totally annihilate Front Street. And me as a homeowner in Issaquah and a taxpayer, and the fact that nobody's going to look at us and help us out is upsetting to me. So I don't approve this. I approve the food bank wholeheartedly. I'll even go over there and give them my time to it. But I do not approve them zoning it to be able to put housing on it for the lower income people unless they're willing to put the money out and improve Front Street and improve our infrastructure. Thank you.
Alrighty, everyone else drew a line through their name, so I'll give another second shot to anyone else who would like to present during this time in the room. No one has also indicated that they would like to speak online.
Okay, thanks, Jared. We'll do one more just kind of call to make sure that no one either virtual or in the room would like to speak. We know the drill by now. If you do, raise your hand. We'll let it go once, twice, 3 times.
Sold.
Perfect. Okay. And so if there are no more comments, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing at 8:15 p.m. And so it's time for us again to deliberate on this topic. In order to do that, someone must first make a motion and it must be seconded. PPC, would anyone like to make a motion?
I would like to move to approve the findings of fact for the recommended approval of the proposed land use designation and zoning amendments for Proposal 3 for the Our Savior Lutheran Church parcel 343-206-9217.
I'll second.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a motion on the second on the floor. Would anyone like to comment on that motion?
You guys are just waiting me out. I would like to comment, and I want to thank, again, everybody who came to speak and who spoke online and allowing us this time to consider this proposal, and I love the proposal. I really do. But what the proposal that I'm speaking to is the redevelopment of the property in a mission-driven way for the community. I think it's just great. However, what's in front of me is a rezone and an upzone in a higher density of residential. And according to our criteria, and the only defensible way that we can do a site-specific rezone in this process is if all the approval criteria request will be granted only if all the following criteria are met. And again, number 3, growth controls say that you would need to show that you couldn't achieve your growth goals, which we can, and we talked about that earlier, how we have 4 times the growth capacity in the central Issaquah plan than the residential that we need. So the simple rezone to multifamily high, which is all that's in front of me, really. And I love hearing all the other stories because that's the stuff that interests me. But all I can approve or disapprove today is, should I upzone it? And I don't think I can because of that criteria number 3. Now, another thing that it says under criteria number 3 is that unless the city approves a development agreement as part of the rezone proposal. Well, that's not before me today. If it were before me, I'd have a little bit more something to talk about, but I don't have that. I am pointing to that, though, saying I wish I did, because that way we could include the objectives that are being brought before us, the services, the food bank, all the other things. Simply rezoning it to a higher zone, I can't support. So just putting that out there in what I hope is the most constructive way, not shooting down the idea that the Lutheran Church has, but rather responding to the process before me. Thank you.
I will jump in and say that I think this is something that we've all struggled with. We come at this from a very particular perspective and a very narrow lens. Right now, the request for the upzone gives us some serious challenges. It would be lovely to be able to float along with the community. I think all of us see the huge potential in this on so many levels. And I wish very much that we were in a different situation than we were in. But I keep going back to what we're being presented with, and I struggle with upzoning this area to multifamily high. I agree that the map looks nice when you zone in real close, but if you zoom out, there is plenty of single family around the area. The only redeeming thing that I would love to hear from my commissioners is that when I've been on site, I've been able to see that there is a huge amount of impervious surface. And so the ability to rezone and upzone, I don't know that would have that much of a detrimental effect, because I do trust that staff will do the due diligence that they need to do to preserve the creek bed, to be able to adjust for the additional trips that would be coming on, depending on whatever that ends up being. I don't look at it from that perspective. However, I don't know that this particular proposal in front of us is the right time for this. There was a mention in some of the dialogue that we had about a delay from this recommendation at this time, should council not pursue this, on the advice of the administration, would cause a multi-year, 7-year delay to this, right? And I think that that was an instinct of mine to go, whoa, that's not what we want, right? But it's also something that's not in front of us today. And so when looking at what's in front of us, I have serious concerns about it. I wish that I had easier answers for it, because man, would I love to have this site actualized in the way that the community wants and desperately needs it to be. So I would love to hear more from the commissioners.
I agree, this one's been a bit of a struggle. I mean, Nina really pointed out, you know, what we're supposed to look at versus that bigger picture of what they want to do with the food bank, which I think we're all super excited about. But I do think one argument that came out within our materials was that all the zoning around this area is all multifamily. And this is kind of a funny little piece that's zoned differently than the surrounding area. So it seemed like a pretty logical argument to have it zoned similarly to the areas around it, that it is sort of odd that this piece sits in its own little island of more limited zoning. So, you know, there's that argument to making it consistent with the rest of the area.
And I might add, even just dealing with the efficiency of the land use as well, from a cluster perspective, and to be able to make it that multifamily density per se than what it is right now would actually benefit as well. I think you brought up a good point, Commissioner, regarding about the surrounding zoning around that parcel as well, which is actually pretty important to note. We do also note, of course, the growth control aspect, of course, and that's something that, like both commissioners have noted, as well as the rest of us have noted, has been something that's been provided some heartache in the sense of us reading these letters that you guys have sent to us, the testimonies you guys have given to us. So it is a hard decision, and to be able to make a recommendation. So we'll do what we can according to the information that we have right now. Thank you.
I have a question, if I can, just as I've been listening to this. Given what the surrounding land uses are, given the public benefit of a food bank, if they were, is there a possibility, I'm not asking for a commitment, but is there a possibility to like get a variance or something like that to go to a higher height for a food bank sort of development within the existing land use? Does that make sense?
So right now, the maximum height in multifamily high is 40 feet. No, that's the base height. I apologize. That's the base height. They could go up to 65 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a variance, but there are conditions tied to that. So you have to do step backs. It's like a 25% step back for every floor over the second floor. And you have to increase your pervious surface. So that's a possibility. But no, I don't believe a variance going above that maximum height is allowed.
Within the existing land use, so within that single family?
Oh, within the single family, no.
Okay, so
That's
there's no
30 feet
possible
is
way to go
30
higher.
feet is the maximum. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I think if you, this is Minnie, again, I think what you're asking is, can anyone apply for a variance? Yes, they can. Everyone has a due process, but to meet the criteria, it's going to be very difficult. But what's the unique circumstances that apply to this? So it's a hearing examiner process that you can go through a variance process, but the likelihood of it being approved is not great.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And I'm glad, Carolyn, you brought up the adjacent uses, because it's interesting to me about the multifamily high that is around there, and why is it there? Everybody kind of wonders, how did they get there? But if I recall that, and correct me, Kristen, if I'm wrong, about Inge Johnson Park was single-family residential before it was purchased and turned into a park, and is part of a kind of a promenade, a stretch of single-family small lot that runs along Issaquah Creek for a reason. So you could dial into the one little picture that we have in our packet, or you could look at that whole corridor and evaluate the adjacent uses. But still, I think that my challenge is that under these circumstances, I don't think I can approve an upzone to multifamily high, because the definition of that does not necessarily achieve the objectives that I'm hearing in the room that I would really like to achieve. So that's where I'm going with that. Thank you.
I think what's interesting for us to debate and consider is what our options are in front of us, right? We have the recommendation of the administration, but our role in advising council can really be one that says what's presented in front of us does not make sense. However, under the particular conditions, whether that be a memorandum of understanding, that we very much support this project. Right, I think that there is a way for this commission to be able to support this movement as we communicate to council our feelings about this parcel, while still being able to stay within the guidelines of criteria. So I think that's something that would be open for debate about how we want to address council as we're advising them about this property, right? And so I don't know the exact criteria of what city staff and what the council would need to be able to say this is the different agreements and legal binding situations to be able to allow this, because it's not in front of us, right? It's not for us to decide. But I think that's something that's interesting for this commission to decide, is to say, you know, I think we have strong feelings about the possibilities that are here, and yet that's not what's in front of us tonight, unfortunately.
Any other questions? Not a question. I think that's why I brought up my question earlier about the conditions. Is there a way, as we struggle with this one, is there a way to put conditions around it? Either conditions for approval, although I totally understand why those, you know, are very challenging for the city, but even conditions in an MOU to the council regarding our vote, you know, where we stand with this, so that it's not, they understand where we're coming from both sides of this. We are sort of limited, but we're very interested. How can we find a middle ground on this?
Thankfully, the city council loves to watch our meetings, and of course they play it at 1 3/4 speed on YouTube. But and I think, and that's one reason why I'm being particularly noisy and redundant tonight about a development agreement, because that's for somebody like the city council to do and the administration to support. I think they'll hear us. I did have Kristen put the conditions back on the screen with my familiarity and development agreements, and then looking at how can it just didn't look like I could do that tonight. Now, perhaps with the preparation time between now and when the city council sees this themselves, maybe they could figure something out. We're sending them a recommendation, and I trust the staff to characterize our deliberations as well as their keen ear to what we're saying. That's what I think. That's totally opinion, but that's what I think.
And I think in that recommendation to the council, we can highlight the benefit to the community. And I think that's really one of the main things here, as opposed to that growth control, the intent that the church is actually looking at per se. So I think that's something that we need to be able to look at. We understand the guidelines that we have to address every one of these things that come up to us, but we also have to factor in each and every one of those criteria as well, and give them that importance as well.
I would like to make a motion. I would like to we have a motion already on, but I should be able to make an amendment to the motion. And what I'd like to do is make an amendment to the motion at hand, that the Planning Policy Commission recommends that council engage with the applicant to form a development agreement to be able to pursue the finer details on this property.
You do need a second before you can discuss this. Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we now have an amended motion on the table.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to have debate on this. I think that from where I sit, looking at the variety of benefits that this proposal could have for the community, it's hard to dismiss. I very much want to see many of these dreams realized, and I want to make sure that it's done in a way that supports the community to its fullest. I really believe this applicant is a fantastic partner in this community, and I want to give them every chance to pursue what they think is appropriate for serving the needs of our community, and want to encourage council to be able to have the full support of the community behind that as well. And this seems to be the best way for us to be able to make the case separately from the motion to council, if people agree.
I would like to support that statement. I feel like at this point in time, we have an idea, but we don't have enough details in front of us in particular to make a decision that will, move forward correctly, I think. And so if we can take an opportunity to get in front of the council with this and maybe look at continuing the conversation versus resetting that counter to the 6 or 7 years that was kind of thrown out as having to reapply. Like, I want to avoid that, but I also don't want to rush to a decision on this for, the sake of goodwill. And so I think if there's any opportunity that we can make a formal recommendation to continue this discussion without making a super formal decision tonight, I think it would be for the best of everyone involved.
I'm in. Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. I agree, of course. And to your point, the opportunity of the city to work on developing or creating a development agreement will allow us to work out those finer details that we aren't really admittedly addressing tonight. It may allow for a different kind of zoning configuration than just the flat multifamily high and those uses that are in here. I think the creativity and the allowable specificity of a development agreement could be well applied in this place. I appreciate the amendment. Thank you, Commissioner Lewis.
Yeah, and nothing to add from me other than I agree. Commissioner Longoria, do you have a comment?
I just wanted to say that I fully support Commissioner Lewis's amendment, and I'm on board with that.
Yeah. So it sounds like we can move forward on a vote on that amendment. And so I don't want to say this wrong. So the motion on the floor is to vote on the amendment. Okay, so the amendment is to recommend that the applicant engage with council on a development agreement. And so all in favor of that amendment? Oh, correct me.
I just need a little clarification on what that was. I didn't hear the whole thing, and I need to know clearly what the new motion is, or what the amended motion is.
So it's to recommend that the applicant engage with the city council in discussions on a development agreement.
Okay.
We would recommend that council and the
Yeah.
administration.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so just so we are clear in terms of taking forward your recommendation. So your recommendation is to not approve the rezone without?
We haven't voted on the motion yet, so we haven't
Okay.
made a recommendation on that. The only thing we're doing right now is the amendment to the motion. Next, we will do the motion. We haven't made a recommendation to staff. Right now, we're only voting on the amendment.
Okay, so the amendment was to,
We're recommending, the Planning Policy Commission is recommending to city staff and to the council to further engage with the applicant and enter into a,
Not to discuss the development agreement.
thank you, to discuss a development agreement and that we support.
Yeah, so that's, our discussion here is that that's not necessarily an amendment to the motion, that's an additional motion.
Okay.
It could be, or it could be an amendment.
So an amendment to the motion would be to,
Yeah, let's do that. Let's make another motion later.
okay, something like, we recommend
Yeah,
approval
let's do that.
if, and keep in mind too, that development agreements are voluntary. So
Yeah.
this is not something that can be required of the applicant, they would have to buy into
Oh, God,
this.
no, it was a
Okay.
discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have to take your amendment.
Chair, I would like to rescind my amendment.
Okay, and Chair's getting a little out of her depth here. so-
Yeah, and instead, I'm gonna make a second amendment will be, so we have one motion on the floor. I'm gonna make a second, as the author, I'm withdrawing the amendment, and I'm now going to propose a second motion, which will be that the Planning Policy Commission encourages to further the work on this parcel by having a discussion of city staff and the council with the applicant to enter into a development agreement to create a legally binding framework. We don't even need that.
Last word.
Yeah,
The development agreement is already.
a development agreement.
But it's to enter into discussions.
Do I have a?
Oh, yeah, I second that motion if it's about discussions on the development agreement between the city and the applicant.
Okay. So now do we vote on both of those two
No,
motions?
we do one
Just
at
the
a time.
one? But, I mean, we vote on the
gotta
first
vote
one and
one.
then we vote on the second one. Yeah.
The original motion.
Let me just finish writing this
The
down.
original motion
Is to approve.
and the original motion is the staff is
It's approving,
Is
yeah.
approving.
Yeah.
So from a deliberation standpoint, would it make sense to withdraw the original motion in lieu of the
No, we would need to vote it down because they're separate ones. We still need to be able to present to city staff the finding of fact for number 3. So we either need to vote in agreement that it is or disagreement. So we still have to vote on the finding of fact.
And I hope we'll have a restating of that original motion when it comes
Yeah.
time to the vote.
We will try. So are we good to vote? We feel ready to vote? Commissioner Longoria, virtually feel ready to vote?
If you restate.
Yeah, I'll restate. Okay.
Is there any further discussion on the dais?
Yeah, that's what I'm checking, if we're ready to vote or. Okay. Okay, so we have two motions on the floor. We'll vote on the first one first. So all in favor of the motion to recommend approving the findings of fact for the Our Lady, our Savior, Lutheran Church parcel, which is to approve that rezone. If you're in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. I see no yays. If you are opposed, okay, so we have, that motion does not pass with a vote of 0 to 7 in favor of the nays. And we now have a second motion on the floor. And so all in favor of the motion to recommend that PPC encourages to further the work on this parcel for city council and staff to enter into discussions with the applicant on a development agreement. If you are in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. Okay, so I'm seeing unanimous, 7 yeas on that motion. So that motion passes with a vote of 7 to 0. Staff get what they need from us? Go ahead.
So I think what would be helpful for city council is to understand your thought process for the development agreement. You know, are you suggesting the development agreement, like one of, you made a recommendation that it doesn't comply with criteria number 3, therefore a development agreement is the path? I mean, there's the consensus among the commissioners, but also what are the terms or what are some concerns that you'd like to be addressed as part of the development agreement? I think that information would be helpful for city council.
Thank you. I'm going to come right out of the gun if it's okay. So criteria number 3 was why I couldn't approve the upzone. It's not necessarily linked to the encouraging city council and the staff to talk to the applicant about a possible development agreement. The possible development agreement is where the rich discussion and commitments and exchange of I don't mean to say, yeah, it's just to protect the vision over a period of time that it takes for these things to happen. That's what the development agreement is for. And the criteria number 3 and the upzone to multifamily high is a separate thing, and the reason why I did not feel I could approve of the comprehensive plan upzone change.
As a longtime planning policy commissioner, I fully support the proposal that's in front of us that is not in front of us, so to speak, right? If we were looking at different information, I would be able to vote differently. If I was counsel, we are not, we would be able to be into a different discussion. But what's in front of me right now is an upzone to multifamily high, and that is what I can't support. What I can support is to say that I have full support for this applicant and their plan for the property, and encourage them to enter into agreements with council to be able to realize their dream. I want to support that in every way, but right now that's not in front of me.
So I'd like to do a straw poll or vote, an informal vote. Commissioner Milligan stated that she could not vote on the original motion because of criteria number 3 and growth targets. But I did not hear, but would support it in exchange for seeing the vision of this public benefit happening on the site. But Commissioner Milligan was the only one who stated that. So if this is going to go into a findings of fact that goes to council, it needs to be supported by the whole commission. So if I could see a show of hands of those.
But wait a minute, didn't you get it with the motion? The motion said we encourage a development agreement to be discussed.
You did, but it didn't tie it. Remember we said with the conditions that it needed to be tied.
Oh, I didn't put conditions on what the development agreement needed to be. I thought it needed to be in the condition of a development agreement. And I wasn't on purpose being specific about what the conditions are.
Okay.
That's a future discussion that we're not having. Right. All we had tonight was, would you like to change the zoning and the use on this site? And I, for one, said no.
Yeah, so we're just trying to capture the intent of your no. So if you all voted no on the rezone, because of the however many criteria we have, so we heard it doesn't comply with criteria number 3 because the growth targets are a 20-year growth target, and we're on track of meeting those, and we don't need an upzone to meet our, and there's enough capacity. So that was one finding for your denial. Is there also another criteria for community benefit? And
thank you, Minnie. I'll just jump in.
Okay.
We only needed one.
Sure.
And so I was, for the sake of time and simplification, focusing on one, but there are many. The Central Issaquah Plan is I'm not going to, Commissioner Lewis is going to come up with a word, but it also directs not just what the capacity is, but where it is.
Sure.
And it is very important to recognize that it's on the other side of town. So it wasn't just that we have the capacity to put it somewhere, it's where it was. And the reason why it's there. The reason why it's there is because of so many complicated issues about urban growth centers, mass transit, funding, all sorts of things. We could have gone down that path, but didn't have to, because it only needed one thing that didn't fit.
Sure, and so we're just trying to capture, do the rest of your, the commissioners support that finding that it doesn't comply with that number 3 criteria?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to ask, if he's still there with us, Chair Voice to come back. He's been recused for quite a while. And I will pass this back over to him to walk us through the rest of this meeting.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bader. Jared, am I out of the penalty box? That's all I want to know.
Yes, you are.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of the commissioners, all of the petitioners, and all of you commenters on tonight's fantastic discussion. I've been listening intently. It's been great. I think it was a masterclass in city government. And yeah, just very knowledgeable, everybody participating. That was fantastic. I want to say a very, very big thank you to our fantastic Vice Chair, Commissioner Bader, who was just phenomenal tonight. We had this whole thing worked out. I was going to pass the baton, and of course, because of technology and you know, good plans, completely failed, and she still was able to take it and run with the ball in a fantastic way. So thank you very much, Vice Chair Bader. We are going to move along to reports this evening as far as City Council updates. Staff, do you have anything to provide us this evening?
Sure. Good evening, Commissioners. So one update I can provide you on Title 18. So all that excellent work that you all have done on that project. We've been briefing our Planning Development Environment Committee, and they have looked at the sixth bucket, the last of the 6 pieces. For the new members, we divided the whole land use code into 6 different groupings, or we call them buckets. But so they've looked at the last piece, and the next steps, we've engaged with the testing. I don't know how much, if we actually kind of shared where that process is with all of you. So we had a call for the testers within everyone who's been in the community interested parties list for Title 18, as well as anyone that applied for a land use application in the last year. And we had a good response of about 17 to 20 people. So we had about 6 or 7 categories of projects that we wanted to test. Single family home remodel that is next to a wetland, a multifamily development or a mixed-use development in central Issaquah, development on a forested hillside, next to a shoreline, a commercial project outside of the central Issaquah. So we came up with the categories that were spread out, and then, and commercial remodel in Old Town. So it was going to touch different pieces of the code. And there were 7 folks that were part of this core team of testing team that are evaluating and coming up with projects, sites, and then staff will be working with them to come up with that. Once that goes through that whole process, we'll come back to this commission and share the findings, what we learned, how we tweaked the code based on that feedback. So that's happening. We're also looking at SEPA determination coming up soon. Once those pieces are done, we intend to have the public hearings on consolidated draft with this commission in November. So a lot of reading coming your way. But in terms of the council updates, that's what we've done. The other part I think the council was involved in was looking at the whiteboard list. I think we shared that with all of you. If we haven't, we'll set some time up to have a conversation with you on the whiteboard. And the council committee, for the purposes of the budget for the next 2 years, prioritized a few items from that list that are part of the budget that the council is considering this year for the next 2 years. And, one of them is the stream buffers, more in-depth analysis of on the grounds assessment, missing middle, how we're meeting our strategy, adopted housing strategies for diversity of housing choices, and parking. So those are the 3 top that the council put forth in terms of prioritizing from the whiteboard list. So that's all I have. Did I miss anything? Okay. Thank you. Welcome to the new members. It's great to see all of you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
I wanted to put in an official request for a printed version of the Title 18.
We can accommodate that.
And if you guys can let us know when they're available to pick up, I'm happy to pick it up.
For the consolidated draft?
Yes,
Absolutely,
please.
we'll get you a
Yeah.
printed copy. Yeah, so
Yeah.
how many of you actually want a paper copy? All of you?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, we'll get those to you.
And do you have an expected date?
You know,
Hoping
we
it's not
have
the week
released to
before.
the folks that are testing, but we are calling it a preliminary draft. So we're working on cleaning up the document and a few things here and there that are still missing. So I believe we're targeting end of October.
Yeah, it makes it easier to have the document than to go to each and every tab on the website, so.
Sure, sure. No, we'll get you a consolidated piece in a binder and a folder and with tabs if you want tabs. The benefit of the electronic is, you know, we'll give you both. So feel free, you could click on the link and it'll, you know, from the table of contents, it takes you to that. So there's some pros and cons, but it's always good to go back and forth if you're trying to compare things. So we'll get you both a digital copy and a paper copy.
And one more question to what you had said. We did have the whiteboard come to us, but there was something about it that I didn't feel like I was either briefed before I came or something like that. I wasn't really able to engage in the conversation, so I appreciate you saying that the whiteboard would be coming back to us. Is that right?
Well, I missed that meeting or you weren't there either? Okay. So we're happy to schedule another meeting on the whiteboard. Because I think we had said as you conclude the conversation on all 6 buckets, we'll bring it back to you. So we'll figure out a date and then bring it back to you, absolutely. Yep.
I'm wondering, Minnie, if it's applicable for, you know, as we went through preliminary planning, first draft, it became a little bit of a catchphrase, right? Put it on the whiteboard, right? Put it in the garage. And so as we've now formalized that process, there were particular things that the administration had put on the official whiteboard. And I'm curious, as we go through the final draft for Title 18, if basically as we're going through things, we're able to say, hey, and we'd like to put that on the whiteboard. And we'd be able to basically come up with a little bit of a more formal list that PPC says, hey, we'd like council to look at these additional items and be able to kind of, we weren't able to kind of add to the process in a more formal way when we had the meeting. And if we're able to kind of have that movement when we're going through the draft code, might be easier as we're going through piece by piece.
Sure. I mean, you know, we'll maintain that list regardless of how, you know, if there are things you find that are missing, we'd be happy to add to the list. Yeah.
I say this only to be helpful. Is the whiteboard ready enough to be with this next copy, this next version, so that, no, it's not, so that we could say, oh, good, that's on the whiteboard?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we have a copy. I mean, we've briefed the committee.
Yeah. I don't have a
Kristen
copy.
has some input.
Well, I just think that with the public participation and the runs, that there will be additional things added to the whiteboard. So, yeah, I mean, we can give you what we have. Okay.
Yep.
It's not quite ready for prime time, huh? Okay, this is very difficult for me because, and I need a shot of the dais because I can't tell who's talking or who wants to talk. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you, staff. Does staff have any additional city council updates?
No, that should do it.
All right. Is there any other business or announcements from staff? All right. Hearing none. Go ahead.
No, I just said there are none.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen. All right. Well, does anyone have anything else, commissioners, for the good of the order? Nina does.
Can we say it? Did we say it enough? Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to join us in our little party, to all the new commissioners. Here, we can't say it enough.
Right. No, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Amma. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys in person when I don't have a cold and I can't get you sick. And also with Jamie. So any other business items for the good of the order?
For the good of the order, does staff mind reminding us when we'll be seeing each other next? I believe our next meeting was canceled, and so if you could give us a quick reminder on when we'll be back together.
Right, the October 27th meeting is canceled. That is a holiday, a cultural holiday. And so the next one falls in November, and it's, I believe it's November 10th. November 10th is the next one. Yeah.
Right, and then we have one on the 17th, both public hearings, and then we have a final public hearing on December 1st. So we got our December 1st meeting.
Yes, very
We
good.
did. Right, I looked at my calendar. I read my packet. So, all right, everyone. Well, without any further business, we will adjourn this meeting tonight at 8:56 p.m. Night, everyone.